Assalamu alaikum. Today we're going to discuss a very serious issue relating to how we approach the Quran to understand it correctly based on recognizing the differences in meanings of a single letter. So you're going to hear some controversial issues and some controversial conclusions that I hope you will be patient enough to listen until the very end and then make up your own mind. But first, let us understand that in the Quran, to understand correctly the various implications of the terms, we have to pay attention to everything, not just the words or the sentences or the context, but even single letters and even specific accents or what's called diacritics. Now, let's take an example. From the English language, we have something called phrasal verbs. What are phrasal verbs? So when I say I came, that means I was not here and I arrived. But when I say I came in, that means I was outside and I entered into a room of some sort. Similarly, when I say Steve came out, that means I'm outside and Steve was inside, but he came out. So the addition of a preposition changes the meaning, changes the indication. When I say something came up, that means something happened, right? When I say he came up with, you expect to hear a new idea of some sort or a plan, right? And when I say when someone says he came unto me, you understand that she's accusing that person of harassment of some sort, and so on. So the addition of a preposition changes the meaning significantly at times from the original simple meaning of to come versus whatever it is that you come up with or you end up with at the end after adding the preposition. Now, we're going to use this concept to elaborate using two examples. The first example is from Surah Al-Qasas, number 28. One letter is a difference between two sentences that came in two verses. The first verse, verse 28:37, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَالَ مُوسَى رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ بِمَنْ جَاءَ بِالْهُدَى. And Musa said, my Lord knows best about he who proffered the guidance. In verse 28:85, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he says, قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْهُدَى. Say, my Lord knows best he who proffered guidance. So the difference is one single letter, and I put a circle around that letter, which is the letter Ba. It's a very small letter with a dot below it, and it means about in English. And that changed the meaning. We understand from that difference is that in the case of Prophet Musa or Prophet Moses, when he came back to Egypt after his self-exile, after escaping, after killing that man and escaping and returning after a while, he was missioned by God to go get the Israelites out of Egypt. But the Israelites refused him. They did not accept him. Their accusation against Prophet Musa was that they did not approve of his character, because in his youth, before he left Egypt the first time, he was involved with the gangs of Pharaoh, and he actually killed someone. As we shall see in later video segments, he killed one of the Israelites. Anyway, the Israelites did not accept him because they accused his character. They did not approve of his character. They approved with his affiliation. In other words, he had the quote-unquote right belonging. He belonged as one of them, but his character was not acceptable to them. In the second case, verse number 85, the Israelites, again, around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they did not approve of Prophet Muhammad, not because of his character, but because he did not belong to their clan. See, the Jews at that time were like the Zionists of today. They considered their religion a racial club. They wanted to only have within their religion people who belong to their race. The same thing was happening at the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They did not criticize his character. His character was above reproach, but his affiliation, his racial affiliation, was not quote unquote in agreement with what they expected. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say the exact same sentence but without the letter ba. قُلْ رَبِّي أَعْلَمُ مَنْ جَاءَ بِالْهُدَى. My Lord knows best he who proffered the guidance. Now, we see how this one letter made a huge difference for us understanding a lot more about the sentence itself, but about the context itself. The context that really elaborates one of the main purposes of the surah, Surah 28, which is Surah Al-Qasas. And that's summarized in verse number 68 of the same surah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَرَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ مَا كَانَ لَهُمْ الْخِيَارَةُ. Your Lord creates whoever He chooses or He wills, and He chooses those who are designated as messengers. It is not up to them. That choice is not up to them. So now we understand a little bit of a basic application of how one letter can make a huge difference to the meaning. Let's take the second example, which has a lot more serious implications and a lot more controversial conclusions and indication. That example is around the expression مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. Let me repeat it slowly. مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ. This li is the character in question. It's a preposition that means different things depending on how it falls within the phrasal verb it's used. Now, the first verse, actually this expression is used in many different verses. I'm going to cite 5. I'm not going to go through them in detail. I'll include the details in the description below and I'll put them up on the screen as numbers for you to research them if you are interested. But you need to verify for yourself. It is unfortunate though, when you go to the translations and when you go to the commentaries, you find that consistently all the translations and all the commentaries have neglected this one letter, li, lima bayna yaday. So the verses are number 2, 97, number 3, 3, number 6, 46, number 35, 31, and number 46, 30. As I said, I'm including those verses in the description. Now, the same expression occurred in a much more elaborated meaning or indication in verse 6:48. And that verse says, وَأَنزَلْنَا إِلَيْكَ الْكِتَابَ بِالْحَقِّ مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ الْكِتَابِ وَمُهَيْمِنًا عَلَيْهِ. And we revealed to you the scripture, meaning the Quran. It's addressing Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. We revealed to you the scripture, correcting that which is available of earlier scriptures, meaning is available to you of earlier scriptures, meaning the versions that existed at that time. And by the way, they did not get any better since that time. Correcting that which is available of earlier scriptures and dominating over it. And that's the key word, dominating over it. So when we hear مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, it does not mean approving that which is available, but correcting it, redressing its mistakes. It means disapproving of it. It means rejecting its content. And that is confirmed by so many other verses where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us specifically that the people of earlier scriptures corrupted their scriptures. They modified them. And we lost many parts of those scriptures, and many of those scriptures were modified, changed. The intentions behind specifically the stories were changed. And now we don't have the original stories that came in the earlier scriptures, but these stories were corrected in the Quran. And therefore, when we hear مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ, we understand that at least the stories, and a lot more, we know that, but at least the stories that came from the corrupted versions of the earlier scriptures are no good. We cannot accept them. We cannot use them to interpret the Quran. And yet it is unfortunate and very sad, because I've done the research over the last 2 years, and I found consistently that all of the commentators on the Quran and all the translators have accepted the stories from the Torah and from the Bible in general and imposed them by force, not because they fit, but because they predetermined in their heads that these stories are the right ones, and the Quran must be talking about the same version of these stories that appear the same. Unfortunately, we ended up with about 60% of the Quran misinterpreted due to this big mistake that relates to one letter, the letter li ma bayna yaday. This one mistake has caused the confusion of Muslim commentators, all of them, and I mean what I say, all of them have been confused about this one letter. Frankly, I went back and researched and worked really hard to try to find an excuse for them, and I could not find an excuse. The best explanation that some of them gave was, some of those commentators understood that it was questionable to take from the old scriptures or the existing versions of the old scriptures the stories and imposing them on the Quran. And their justification was, if it does not conflict with what the Quran says, then we take it. But that argument, let me repeat it again, if it does not conflict with what the Quran says, then we take it. The question is, how do you know what the Quran said if you did not investigate the Quran independently first? And they did not do this. It's like they cheated and they went to the Torah, corrupted versions of the Torah, and they took those stories and forced the Quran to accept those stories. In reality, let me share with you a secret that very, very few people know. The stories of the Quran are purposefully composed in a way to look like those other stories. But in reality, if you dig through them, which I've done, you find out dramatic differences. And you find more exciting stories, you find more interesting stories, you find more mature stories, and you find more educational and invigorating stories that also include legal matters. And that's another thing that the commentators dismissed. They said specifically, stories do not bring us legislative indications, legislative decrees. And that's wrong. And I discovered that in some stories, we are taught to learn from these stories, specifically these noble legislative values and norms and decrees. In future segments, inshallah, we will talk more about these things and we will discover some amazing differences. In conclusion, the stories of the Quran are not to be derived from the Torah or from the Gospel or from the Bible. They are to be dug out, investigated, explored from the Quran itself, using the language of the Quran, using the prepositions as used by the Quran, and using the context that are set up within the surahs that include these stories or segments of these stories. I will conclude by saying, as an evidence to what I'm saying, if you go to Surah Yusuf, verse number 102, it says, ذَلِكَ مِنْ أَنْبَاءِ الْغَيْبِ نُوحِيهِ إِلَيْكَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that, meaning that story, all of this that we recited in Surah Yusuf, which is exclusively about the story of Yusuf, all of that has been inaccessible to you, has been imperceptible to you, meaning it wasn't available. And if it is not available to Prophet Muhammad, it's not available to anybody else. Because Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the model. So if it is ghaib, it is ghaib for everybody at the time. That means it was not in any of the books, any of the versions of the books. And we revealed it to you. So this is clear evidence that the story of Yusuf, as told of the Quran, in the Quran, was imperceptible, unknown at the time of its revelation in the Quran. Therefore, it could not have been the same story that is told in Genesis of the Old Testament or of the Sansino Chumash of the Torah. I hope this was helpful. I know this is very controversial, And I know it leaves you with a lot of questions, and inshallah in future segments we will address some of these questions, and we will start to explore details about some of the beautiful stories in the Quran. Thank you for watching.